Hey, what is up everybody? Blaze for here, and today for you guys another video of Persona 5X. Inside today's video, guys, I'm just going to be playing this palace in the background pretty much while explaining some strategies and tips that you guys can use. Now, this is going to be, I think, the last video that we're going to use our free-to-play account, our KR account for pretty much for a little bit, or at least maybe for like a day or two, because I want to focus more on my main account as well while I'm playing on this one. So I have some videos that I want to do on that account. But by the way, this is going to be taking place on our little, at least secondary account, so I can have some examples of what I mean by there's some things that a lot of us can do. It just comes down to strategy making. Now, this game, a lot of people do feel like is kind of hard, especially when it comes down to certain bosses. Palace 3 was a very like huge deal of that, where we had a ton of people on the worldwide server, a ton of people in my server here, just really complaining that the third palace was really difficult. The reason for this is because it comes down to strategies and things you really do to give your account that extra oomph, or to give your account a better chance at living in general, right? It's gonna be hard, it's gonna be something that's kind of annoying, but there are ways to get around it. The real question today is, what are those ways? What can we do to get around certain things? What strategies do we have to use? So one of the first things that I'm going to be going over is, of course, let's go ahead and get started with, if you can't beat something, what do you do next, right? You're stuck on the wall, you're hitting this wall, you can't physically beat it, you don't know why you can't beat it, right? Well, one of the few things that you got to see, first of all, even if you can't beat it, try it for the first time, try it for the second time, maybe give it a third, right? The reasoning for this is because you want to see exactly where you're landing. Let's say like I can beat a boss, has 3 health bars, but I can only get down 2. What am I missing for this? What's happening that is actually giving me this issue, right? And normally 9 times out of 10, your characters just probably aren't strong enough. Now, there was plenty of times I was starting this KR account where I was like, dang, I'm not strong enough for this. I feel like that I just need to stop trying it, but I kept trying. And the reason what you do is when you hit that wall, go ahead and move to what's it called? Move to mementos. Mementos is going to be your best friend in this outcome. I know a lot of people don't like to do mementos too often because it is sometimes long and boring. The maps get bigger and bigger. You're just traveling in the car until you get into like a mini boss fight, which can be sometimes annoying. But the main reason why I recommend doing this is because mementos itself gives a decent bit of rewards, a player EXP, so you don't have to use your stamina for this as well. You just get a lot of player EXP, and then with this in mind as well, you're also able to take advantage and sit there and get tons of cards for your characters. When you're able to actually go ahead and sit there and do mementos, whole key point is to give you those cards, give you those upgrade materials that you're able to just obtain by just completing it itself. You want to go ahead and try to get your characters, or at least most of your starter cards, from there, so it keeps you from going ahead and farming. Doing this will immediately save you some stamina, so when it does come down to you having no other choice but using your daily stamina, you know exactly where you want to focus that on and know exactly how you want to focus it on, right? That's pretty much the main standpoint. But Blade, what happens if I get stuck in mementos after I get stuck on the story? Well, here's the thing, when it does come to something like that, usually there's a way to get around it, right? Don't always let autoplay, like what I'm doing right now, don't always let this do for you, because it's not always going to work. It depends on your team comp. But usually if you get stuck to that point in time, you want to try and switch up your team comps around, right? So like you have, of course, these sets. They may not go for the character themselves, but try it anyways. Put these random sets on. It's mainly the basic stats that we're looking for, right? And at this point in time, you just swap around your team. So there was plenty of times where it got to a point where I couldn't beat with my main team, right? And this was like, I think it was, I was using 4-star closer, the electric one, the shock girl, of course, baseball shock girl. And I was using her. I was using my man Cherish over here, and I was using Rin, who is a 5-star curse starter character, right? And I noticed it just didn't work. So when it happens to be times like that, you have to switch up your team comps. This is another strategy thing that tons of us don't want to always do, because we want to play with characters that we want to play with. But there are certain times where you do need to swap up your team comps, or else it's going to be really hard. So as stubborn as I am, and as I know stubborn as you guys are, you want to go ahead and do this. This kind of leads me to the next point, right? So we've already covered the whole just keep trying until you figure out like what works for you, right? Going for card stuff. We've already figured that part out. So the second part I want to go ahead and talk about is the team comps. Team comps are fairly interesting in this game. If it's something that you feel like you cannot defeat, 9 times out of 10 with a different team comp, which is fairly usable with 4 stars or anything like that, you can most likely defeat it. It just comes down to you sitting there, trying it, and not letting auto take the wheel. Because if you let auto take the wheel, that's where you start to have those issues. That's where you start to have a huge bit of problems of actually clearing things. And I feel like that's where a lot of the community, especially when it comes down to these harder stages, are getting that issue. So let's go ahead and talk about it right this, right? So with this strategy of changing your teams, there are some teams that I would highly advise on. Of course, always have your main team. Everyone's going to most likely have Cord for now on. So keep Cord there, right? Don't matter what it is. Try to keep her in because she's helping you at least rush a lot of your actual your ultimate, right? So with this in mind, we now have Rico. No matter what, is going to be a good, or at least navigator to use. So I would advise either using Rico, or either if you need survivability that badly, use Puppet. Those two are your primary things, right? So we have our navigator, Rico, we have our supporter, boom, Cord, right? That leaves you 2 slots to fill. Normally you want to have a defender. If you have Cherish, that's perfect. If you don't, you could very well use Yuki. She's really good. The only downside to her is she only does a single target shield at first with her skill 2, and then her skill 3, once she has like 4 or 5 stacks, she uses that, it takes down their defense and it gives your whole team a shield. Now that's kind of the downside she has to like kind of set up first, but right, there's still options. So you can either use a shielder, which is really helpful depending on at least how your team is looking, or you can use a healer. I know a couple of us are going to have most likely Morgana to our disposal from at least a selector, or you could use Cattle. The reason why you would probably want to use Cattle here is because it kind of leads into the next part of this team building section, right? Cattle is a fire character who can help you proc off burns. Well, some cheap little team comps that you can possibly use is definitely going to be the burn team comp. On is the first character a lot of you guys, for a standard character at the very beginning, should be picking, without a doubt. The reason for this is because this character not only is already good, but she's able to proc these burns, and these burns are some heavy hitting burns. If there was something that you can't beat, if there's anything that's too tough, she could most likely take it down with just purely burn damaging, and it's just going to take you to survive. So if you already have, what's it called? If you already have, of course, Cord here, Rico for taking down toughness stacks, or maybe Puppet just for just survivability wise, all you need to do is have a healer or a defender, and that's your survivability right there. So at that point in time, you sit there, and as cheap as it may sound, right? Yeah, it's a cheap way of winning, right? Yeah, it's very cheap to win, right? But at the end of the day, we all want the prizes. We all want the prizes. We all want the glory for doing so. And to do so, you kind of got to do some cheap dang tactics. So using DOT with burn is probably a best start for a lot of people that most people need to understand isn't a bad thing. If you're cheaping out the game stages, or at least taking advantage over those game mechanics by beating it with a cheap team, who cares? You beat it. Who's gonna judge you? People are gonna judge you. Okay, you won the fight. Had they won it? No. Guess who's still struggling? Not you, because you won that fight. So do what you need to do. Use what you need to use. And one of those teams that you need to use is a burn team. It's always good to have this easily built early. Cattle's a perfect example of it. You get those heals, get all that nice stuff that he actually has to offer, and he's a 4-star. For heck's sake, that's already good enough. A 4-star can really get you through a lot of stuff. But I digress because I'm rambling a little bit. So that was our second thing, changing team comps. So we already have farming mementos for actual cards, right? Utilize that, and then changing team comps being our second one. And then the third isn't anything too like crazy. It isn't anything too hard or anything like that. This is just some common knowledge, some common sense type deal, right? And this is to really sit down, and if you don't got the time, I understand that, of course, but if you do got the time, sit down, do what you can, rinse and repeat, right? There are some times where there's just things where we can't beat, right? There's just things where we feel like this is absolutely impossible to beat, and that is understandable. Okay, that is something that you can't really get past, and you can't really change that if it gets to that point. What you decide to do is you redo the fight, analyze the fight, and go from there. So at all times, if you're losing like that, hey, learn to take a step back, know when you need to farm, but do it in a way that is very, very iffy on using a lot of your stamina, right? You want to try your hardest to use as little stamina as possible until you really need to use it. If you feel like you can beat the stage, but you need a little bit of stamina to do so, don't use the stamina, right? Don't use it. Try your hardest to beat that stage without that stamina. If you feel like you're getting no diff and you've already tried all of these different teams, then and only then use that said stamina and try to use as little as possible. So what I would advise, right? Let's say I'm getting whooped, right? Getting whooped to death. My DPS isn't cutting it, but she level 50. Okay, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get her to level 60. This allows me to break through her weapon as well to get that to level 60, and then we try again, right? Now, just those 10 levels for both of those has utterly reformed the unit. So don't just go about and just try to like do every last one of your characters if you can't beat the stage. Try to do it one at a time and see what happens. This is gonna be the best way of going about it. And then the last little part to it that also helps into this, if you're really going into a part where you're spiraling and you don't know what you need to do, complete this book. This book is always going to help. Complete the book is always going to help you. I have not done any of that book yet, and we've been actually trucking. So that book will help you out even more so if you just decide to complete it. I haven't done so just yet, so it's definitely possible to do it without it. But if you truly do need it and you need that extra help, doing the book is going to be your best friend. But those are mainly the small strategies I got to offer for today. If you guys found them helpful, be sure, of course, to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And I know there's going to be some people who probably going to complain like, oh, no dip, no, like we already knew this, Captain Obvious. If you knew it, you'd be past it by now. Because if a 5-day-old account can do it, and I've been using 4 stars / like my 2 5 stars I recently got, I know for a fact people who've been on this and who are still stuck on this stage can also do it. So I hate to just come off that way, but sometimes people got to hear the tough part of it. Anyways, till next time, everybody, peace out. I got to get to work.